Yeah.
If you're here for the deep dive, you're probably someone who really values getting to the heart of a topic, but without all the noise. You give us the source material, we dig in and find the insights. And today, we have a really unique mission. We're going deep into a set of personal notes from a hobbyist gardener, someone named Ang.
Yeah, and what makes this so interesting is that it really frames this dilemma that I think we all face in some way. It's that conflict between the absolute joy of a new discovery and then the practical need for patience, for discipline. And in Ang's world, this whole thing centers on one single plant.
The Medinilla magnifica.
Also called the Rose Grape.
The Rose Grape, exactly. A stunning plant.
It's kind of the perfect little story for the learner's journey, isn't it? You find something amazing, complex, but then you immediately run into the reality of, how do I manage this? How do I fit this new knowledge in?
So let's unpack this. Our core question for this deep dive is the undeniable beauty of the rose grape worth what is apparently a notorious time commitment? And what does that tell us about what this plant actually is? We're sort of looking for the opportunity cost of all that beauty.
That's it, exactly. And we should start right where Ang starts, with that pure joy of discovery. Ang writes that the most rewarding part of the hobby for them isn't the final product. It's that first moment, that spark when you recognize a new species, maybe on a field trip or at a nursery, the thrill of a new project.
And that's where it just instantly becomes so relatable. Because that rush, it just slams right up against reality, doesn't it? Ang talks about this ongoing struggle, the urge to just acquire everything new and fascinating versus the need for some restraint.
It's the backlog problem. We all have it. Ang mentions an extensive backlog of garden tasks. There are pots that need repotting, seeds that need to be sown, and, a whole batch of recent purchases that are already taking up all the good spots. So basically, new plants are banned.
Functionally banned, yeah.
Unless
the plant is so incredible it just breaks all the rules. And that plant was the Medinilla magnifica. Ang's description was simple, just truly striking. Enough to almost shatter that discipline.
A discovery just too beautiful to ignore. But before we get into why Ang hesitated, we need to really understand what they were looking at. Because the rose grape isn't your average plant. Its whole nature explains why it's such a time-consuming thing to cultivate.
Okay, so let's break down the characteristics. What made it so attractive, but also so complicated?
Well, first, and this is probably the most important thing to grasp, it's an epiphytic shrub.
Epiphytic.
Right, it's a crucial concept. It means it grows on another plant, like a tree trunk, just for physical support. But, and this is key, it is not a parasite. It gets all its food from the air, from moisture, from the debris that gathers around its roots in the rainforest canopy.
Wow, okay, so that changes everything for a hobbyist, right?
Yeah.
You can't just stick it in a pot of regular soil if it feeds on air and rain. That one little nugget of knowledge immediately ramps up the difficulty.
Precisely. For Ang, this means you have to forget standard soil. You have to think about specialized, chunky, fast-draining mediums. You need high humidity, excellent airflow. You're trying to mimic the branch of a tree high up in the tropics. The complexity of just its physical needs adds to that time cost. You have to learn a whole new way of caring for just this one plant.
Okay, so its feeding is specialized.
Yeah.
What about its lifespan, its general appearance?
The notes mention two other key things. It's evergreen, so it keeps its beautiful, deep, glossy leaves all year round.
Nice.
And it's a perennial. It lives for more than one season. Ang does clarify that this really only applies if you keep it in its ideal tropical environment. So continuous warmth is a must for it to survive long term.
So if you can pull it off, you get this gorgeous, leafy, complex shrub that lives for years. It's a huge visual commitment. And those flowers, the pictures show these layered, bright pink clusters that hang down, like grapes, I guess. The visual payoff is massive.
The payoff is immense, which is exactly why Ang was so tempted. But here's the botanical reality that just slams the brakes on that whole desire. All that complexity we just discussed, being an epiphyte, the size, the energy it needs, it all ties back to one fact. The rose grape is, and this is the quote, a notoriously slow grower.
And that's the real test of patience. That's the real price tag. So let's get into this dilemma of cultivation, because Ang's notes lay out two very different ways to get this plant.
The source outlines two paths for propagation. The first one, for the hobbyist who wants the fastest result, is cuttings. You take a section of a mature existing plant, and that drastically cuts down the wait time. It's the efficiency route, the quick fix.
But then there's the second method, propagation by seeds, which is the one Ang actually prefers. And this seems like it's the difference between buying a finished book and deciding you want to write it yourself from scratch. Aang says they deeply enjoy the process of growing plants from seed. It's about witnessing the whole life cycle.
And that deep enjoyment comes with a very, very steep logistical cost when it comes to the rose grape. Aang's research confirmed it. Growing Medinilla magnifica from a single seed to the point where it actually produces those famous flowers takes a full 2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
That's not just delayed gratification. That's a marathon. That single detail feels like the defining constraint here. The discovery was instant, the appeal is immediate, but seeing the project through, that requires multi-year bandwidth.
And this is where Aang's practical side kicks in. They love the process, yes, but they also have that huge backlog we mentioned. 2 to 3 years for one plant before you even see the main reward. It just fundamentally changes the decision. It goes from being an enthusiastic hobby to a really serious long-term commitment.
It brings up a great question, though. Is Aang contradicting themselves? They value the joy of discovery. They love the process of starting from seed. But the extreme time commitment needed to see that discovery all the way through, that's what stopped them. Is that just being pragmatic, or is there a bigger lesson there?
Oh, I think it's highly pragmatic. It's the wisdom of an expert learner, really. They recognize the opportunity cost if they dedicate the space, the time, the mental energy to a 3-year project. That means maybe 3 or 4 other discoveries, other quicker growing plants, are blocked for that whole time. The wait itself is a resource strain.
That's the real difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Between a spontaneous purchase and a true stewardship project. And for a lot of us as learners, we face this every day. You discover a fascinating topic like, I don't know, the history of this plant's discovery in the Philippines. But choosing to learn that from the seed, reading all the primary research, that's a huge time commitment. Sometimes taking a cutting, a really good summary, is the only practical choice you have.
Exactly. Aang is basically modeling good resource management. They're saying, look, the initial joy of this discovery is profound, but the cost of the process for this specific plant outweighs the value right now, given my other obligations. The desire for that deep, complex process gets trumped by the reality of that 2 to 3 year wait.
So the takeaway is pretty clear. The path to maturity for the rose grape demands restraint, not just in fighting the urge to buy it, but in the serious commitment of patience if you choose to grow it from seed. That fact alone just sets the Medinilla magnifica apart from so many other species where that process-to-payoff ratio is much shorter.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the gardener's need for restraint because of a backlog is a perfect analogy for you, the listener, dealing with information overload. We're constantly finding new rose grapes online, these striking topics that promise a huge intellectual payoff.
And you have to choose which discovery is actually worth the intellectual version of a 3-year commitment. You have to measure a topic not just by how interesting it is, but by the actual time cost of cultivating that knowledge fully.
Which brings us to the core nuggets of knowledge we've distilled from Aang's notes. 1, the subject is Medinilla magnifica, the rose grape. 2, it's an epiphytic shrub. Care has to be about air, humidity, drainage, not soil. And 3, the big one for the hobbyist, it takes 2 to 3 years to flower if you grow it from seed.
So what does this all mean then? It means the most valuable thing Aang learned about the rose grape wasn't its name or species, but its cultivation time. Understanding the logistical cost in patience, in time, is just as important as knowing its botanical classification. That knowledge of the wait time is what allowed Aang to exercise restraint, even though the plant was truly striking.
The ultimate lesson here really is about discipline learning. It's about recognizing that discovery is easy, but dedication is rare. And our resources, whether it's space in your garden or bandwidth in your brain, are finite. The ability to say no to starting a multi-year project just because it's interesting is a pretty high form of intelligence.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive, blending the detailed logistics of growing a tropical plant with the universal challenge of just managing our time and our intellectual curiosity. So thank you for providing these notes from Aang. We started with the joy of discovery and landed on the wisdom of restraint.
And let's leave you with one final thought based on Aang's decision here. If the initial rush of finding the rose grape, that pure moment of discovery, is the most valuable part of the hobby, does the 2 to 3 year wait to see it flower ultimately diminish that joy, or does it enhance it? Does the delayed payoff make the final reward sweeter? Or does the long wait just erode that initial excitement until the plant becomes just another task on the backlog? That's something for you to mull over.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.